Chapter 1. Are you coming in to watch the dancing, Lady Conway? I most decidedly am not. I thoroughly disapprove of the expedition of which this dance is the inauguration. I consider that even by contemplating such a tour alone into the desert with no chaperone or attendant of her own sex, with only native camel drivers and servants, Diana Mayo is behaving with a recklessness and impropriety that is calculated to cast a slur not only on her own reputation, but also on the prestige of her country. I blush to think of it. We English cannot be too careful of our behavior abroad. No opportunity is slight enough for our continental neighbors to cast stones, and this opportunity is very far from being slight. It is the maddest piece of unprincipled folly I have ever heard of. Oh, come, Lady Conway. It's not quite so bad as all that. It is certainly unconventional and, probably not quite wise, but remember Miss Mayo's unusual upbringing. I am not forgetting her unusual upbringing, interrupted Lady Conway. It has been deplorable, but nothing can excuse this scandalous escapade. I knew her mother years ago, and I took it upon myself to expostulate both with Diana and her brother, but Sir Aubrey is hedged around with an egotistical complacency that would defy a pickaxe to penetrate. According to him, a Mayo is beyond criticism, and his sister's reputation her own to deal with. The girl herself seemed, frankly, not to understand the seriousness of her position, and was very flippant and not a little rude. I wash my hands of the whole affair, and will certainly not countenance tonight's entertainment by appearing at it. I have already warned the manager that if the noise is kept up beyond a reasonable hour I shall leave the hotel tomorrow. And, drawing her wrap around her with a little shudder, Lady Conway stalked majestically across the wide veranda of the Biskra Hotel. The two men left standing by the open French window that led into the hotel ballroom looked at each other and smiled. Some peroration, said one with a marked American accent. That's the way scandal's made, I guess. Scandal be hanged. There's never been a breath of scandal attached to Diana Mayo's name. I've known the child since she was a baby. Rum little cuss she was, too. Confound that old woman. She would wreck the reputation of the Archangel Gabriel if he came down to earth, let alone that of a mere human girl. Not a very human girl, laughed the American. She was sure meant for a boy and changed at the last moment. She looks like a boy in petticoats, a damned pretty boy, and a damned haughty one, he added, chuckling. I overheard her this morning, in the garden, making mincemeat of a French officer. The Englishman laughed. Been making love to her, I expect. A thing she does not understand and won't tolerate. She's the coldest little fish in the world, without an idea in her head beyond sport and travel. Clever, though, and plucky as they are made. I don't think she knows the meaning of the word fear. There's a queer streak in the family, isn't there? I heard somebody yapping about it the other night. Father was mad and blew his brains out, so I was told. The Englishman shrugged his shoulders. You can call it mad, if you like, he said slowly. I live near the Mayos in England, and happen to know the story. Sir John Mayo was passionately devoted to his wife. After 20 years of married life they were still lovers. Then this girl was born, and the mother died. 2 hours afterwards her husband shot himself, leaving the baby in the sole care of her brother, who was just 19, and as lazy and as selfish then as he is now. The problem of bringing up a girl child was too much trouble to be solved, so he settled the difficulty by treating her as if she was a boy. The result is what you see. They moved nearer to the open window, looking into the brilliantly lit ballroom, already filled with gaily chattering people. On a slightly raised platform at one end of the room the host and hostess were receiving the guests. The brother and sister were singularly unlike. Sir Aubrey Mayo was very tall and thin, the pallor of his face accentuated by the blackness of his smoothly brushed hair and heavy black mustache. His attitude was a mixture of well-bred courtesy and languid boredom. He seemed too tired even to keep the single eyeglass that he wore in position, for it dropped continually. By contrast, the girl at his side appeared vividly alive. She was only of medium height and very slender, standing erect with the easy, vigorous carriage of an athletic boy, her small head poised proudly. Her scornful mouth and firm chin showed plainly an obstinate determination, and her deep blue eyes were unusually clear and steady. The long, curling black lashes that shaded her eyes and the dark eyebrows were a foil to the thick crop of loose, red gold curls that she wore short, clubbed about her ears. "The result is worth seeing," said the American admiringly, referring to his companion's last remark. A third and younger man joined them. "Hello, Arbuthnot. You're late. The divinity is 10 deep in would-be partners already." A dull red crept into the young man's face, and he jerked his head angrily. "I got waylaid by Lady Conway, poisonous old woman. She had a great deal to say on the subject of Miss Mayo and her trip. She ought to be gagged. I thought she was going on talking all night, so I fairly bolted in the end. All the same, I agree with her on one point. Why can't that lazy-ass Mayo go with his sister?" Nobody seemed to be able to give an answer. The band had begun playing, and the floor was covered with laughing, talking couples. Sir Aubrey Mayo had moved away, and his sister was left standing with several men, who waited, program in hand, but she waved him away with a little smile and a resolute shake of her head. "Things seem to be getting a hustle on," said the American. "Are you going to try your luck?" asked the elder of the two Englishmen. The American bit the end off a cigar with a little smile. "I sure am not. The haughty young lady turned me down as a dancer very early in our acquaintance. I don't blame her," he added, with a rueful laugh, "but her extreme candor still rankles. She told me quite plainly that she had no use for an American who could neither ride nor dance. I did intimate to her, very gently, that there were a few little openings in the States for men beside cattle punching and cabaret dancing, but she froze me with a look, and I faded away. No, Sir egotistical complacency will be having some bridge later on, which will suit me much better. He's not a bad chap underneath if you can swallow his peculiarities, and he's a sportsman. I like to play with him. He doesn't care a darn if he wins or loses. It doesn't matter when you have a banking account the size of his," said Arbuthnot. "Personally, I find dancing more amusing and less expensive. I shall go and take my chance with our hostess." His eyes turned rather eagerly towards the end of the room where the girl was standing alone, straight and slim, the light from an electrolia gilding the thick bright curls framing her beautiful, haughty little face. She was staring down at the dancers with an absent expression in her eyes, as if her thoughts were far away from the crowded ballroom. The American pushed Arbuthnot forward with a little laugh. "Run along, foolish moth, and get your poor little wings singed. When the cruel fair has done trampling on you'll come right along and mop up the remains. If, on the other hand, your temerity meets with the success it deserves, we can celebrate suitably later on." And, linking his arm in his friend's, he drew him away to the card room. Arbuthnot went through the window and worked slowly round the room, hugging the wall, evading dancers, and threading his way through groups of chattering men and women of all nationalities. He came at last to the raised dais on which Diana Mayo was still standing, and climbed up the few steps to her side. "This is luck, Miss Mayo," he said, with an assurance that he was far from feeling. "Am I really fortunate enough to find you without a partner?" She turned to him slowly, with a little crease growing between her arched eyebrows, as if his coming were inopportune, and she resented the interruption to her thoughts, and then she smiled quite frankly.